Hello and welcome to the conversation on News Central TV. I am Rita Omodia. On this program, we get to discuss political stories around the African continent. And right now, today on the conversation, we will be looking at the issues around the deaths of 23 people after hundreds of migrants tried to break into the Spanish enclave of Melilla from Morocco. The UN has also called for an independent inquiry into that incident. And for our second segment, we will discuss the killing of 30 people during clashes over land between neighboring communities in Cameroon's southwest region. And right now we begin with stories from Morocco, where the United Nations has called on Morocco and Spain to ensure respect for the human rights of migrants at their joint border, and in particular that their border officers refrain from any use of excessive force against migrants. In the same vein, the head of the African Union Commission, Charles Moussa Faki Mahamat, denounced the violent and degrading treatment of African migrants. Now, these calls are coming after more than 20 migrants died while attempting to cross the Spanish autonomous city of Melilla. Several people were crushed to death in a stampede after a section of the border fence was cut open, while others may have been killed after falling from a border fence. 76 others were injured, and about 140 police officers were also wounded in the ensuing violence. Both the UN and AU have called for an investigation into the tragedy. Now, joining us live for this conversation, we have Souad Anouar. She's a journalist from Morocco, World News Rabat, Morocco. Thank you so much for joining us, Souad, on the conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So now, Souad, Moroccan authorities have said the individuals died as a result of a stampede after about 2,000 people tried to climb the iron fence that separates Morocco and Melilla, with some falling in the attempt. Meanwhile, the human rights groups have accused Moroccan security officials of using force. So, Souad, what exactly are we looking at here? Is this still a case of human rights violation?
Well, it would be tricky to say if it's a case of human rights violation, knowing that there are different narratives of what's happening, and we don't know exactly what happened on Friday, exactly when 2,000 irregular migrants tried to cross the borders or defense of Melilla from the neighboring city of Nador. At the moment, we are, as you mentioned, there are different calls for investigation, for independent and also transparent investigation from the AU, the African Union, from the UN, but also from Spanish political parties and local community, NGOs in Morocco as well. So there are videos that shows migrants in very bad situations, and many they talked about being subject of violence. However, at the moment, these accusations are under investigation. We cannot confirm what exactly happened. All
right, investigations then, Souad. Now, according to the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, he said a mass attempt by sub-Saharan African migrants who stormed the enclave in Melilla was an attack on territorial integrity by mafias trafficking human beings. Yeah. Now, do you believe that is the case?
Well, this narrative was also echoed by the Moroccan embassy in Madrid, according to some Spanish media who quoted sources from the embassy saying that the attack was organized and there are what the Moroccan embassy called militiamen, or who took part in this, in inciting violence when it comes to this attempt of irregular border crossing. So it is, I would say that it is part of the official narrative of both countries. However, Rabat did not issue any official statements yet. Prime Minister Sanchez earlier today, he mentioned that they're going to be open investigations in Morocco and Spain about what happened in response to international calls for investigation. But at the moment, there is still no official statements, I would say, from the Moroccan part, except for quotes citing Moroccan sources from the Moroccan embassy in Madrid.
Okay, but if you recall, Spain had previously praised Rabat's collaboration defending its borders. What sort of a relationship exists between Spain and Morocco in terms of border control?
Yeah, so the migration is a core topic when it comes to partnership between Morocco and Spain. And if you go back to the 60s, one of the movements of migrant flows to the north, to France, but also Spain. So it's been like constantly discussed by both Rabat and Madrid. And we see the importance of this because Morocco is not only considered as a country of transit, but also it's a country, it's a home country for migrants. It's a country of transit and also a host country. So it plays like three roles at the same time when it comes to migration. That's why like migration is at the core of Morocco's domestic but also foreign policy. And Spain is a major partner for Morocco when it comes to this, with especially that the crossing points from Morocco, there is Ceuta and Melilla, Spanish enclaves that are surrounded by Moroccan territory, but also overseas. And there were thousands of attempts over the past years, irregular migration attempts that were stopped by Moroccan Navy in partnership or support with the Spanish forces. So I would say it's very complex when it comes to my partnership between two countries. Additionally, there is Spain that's pushing for the EU to increase its budget support for Morocco when it comes to migration, and that's last year's was estimated more than 3 million euros, and that money goes not only to the control of migration flow, but also to the implementation of integration programs. And Morocco in 2013 launched its national campaign for the regularization of migrants, and over 50,000 migrants were regularized. Even the non-regularized, according to some laws introduced by Morocco, they can benefit, for instance, from healthcare services. So I would say, yeah, and another thing to add concerning the Morocco-Spanish relations, lately there was a diplomatic crisis that was overcome in the past few months, and one of the main points that were discussed after the diplomatic rapprochement between Madrid and Rabat was migration. There was a joint meeting between officials two countries in Rabat to discuss the joint effort, but also to praise Moroccan role when it comes to controlling the flow of migrants from south to north, while pushing for the Moroccan ambition, I would say, but also Spanish ones for managing humanitarian, managing migration flows in a humane and responsible way. And as Morocco's Minister of Foreign Affairs previously said in 2018 on the sidelines of the Migration Pact in Marrakesh, it said that Morocco is not being the policeman of Europe, but it is acting as a responsible country when it comes to treating these migrants as human beings, not as numbers or maybe a card of bargaining when it comes to national interests.
Okay, so while you're looking at the relationship between Spain and Morocco, now in May we saw the land borders reopen between the two countries. Now, what exactly was the impact on local economy?
Well, as soon as the land borders, because first they were border reopening in February 7th, but for the case of Melilla, it was a bit later. It followed Sanchez's visit to Morocco during Ramadan. And following that, knowing that a very important aspect for economic activity, I would say illegal one, is trafficking, is contraband, what's called contraband. And as soon as there was the decision from the Moroccan side, there was strict measures taken to ensure that such irregular activities are controlled and make sure that they do not impact the domestic economy, the national economy. I think that was like the most important thing when it comes to economic activities. But also, when we're talking about the two Spanish enclaves, the important thing is mobility and people having the freedom of movements between Moroccan cities such as Nador and to Ceuta and Melilla, where they're working. Some are working there, or they're having access to public services there.
Okay, I can't begin to explain how much of a relief it was to people who had businesses around those border areas, talk about mobility and, of course, the economy. Now, Souad, away from that, the Amnesty International Director of Spain, Esteban Beltran, says most of the people trying to climb the fence are from South Sudan. So I wonder, Souad, what impact has the crisis in African countries had on the level of migration? Because over time, we keep on hearing people who are migrating from African countries to European soils. So what has the crisis in African countries had on the level of migration?
Yeah, I would say political stability is one of the major drivers when it comes to pushing people to migrate, especially to the north, looking for better economic opportunities. But I would say now, in addition to the economic instability or political instability, and also the situation of famine in certain countries because of what's happening now with the rising energy and food prices, there is also climate change that playing a major role when it comes to the movement of the people. So all of these factors are putting increasing pressure on countries of transit, but also host countries such as Morocco. And Morocco is one of the major access point to Europe, or one of the major routes to Europe. So, of course, such crisis would lead to more migratory flows to Morocco, adding more pressure on Moroccan authorities and Moroccan forces when it comes to securing the borders, but also when it comes not only securing access to Morocco, stopping the migrants entering Morocco, but also limiting the flow to Spanish enclaves in Northern Africa and Spain or Portugal or other countries in Southern Europe.
So in other words, the political instability in African countries has led to increased migration to European soils. Now, a lot of people following this episode that happened, of which a lot of people died as a result of trying to cross the borders, have talked about a legal passage and safe passage for migrants. Now, comprised of 23 objectives, all of which are commitments by UN member states. The implementation of the Global Compact on Migration, that is the GCM in Africa, was aimed at building a stronger global architecture on migration governance, protection of human rights, and elimination of all forms of discrimination against African migrants and the diaspora. Now, how would you say AU, that's the African Union, what has been the level of commitment on this mandate to ensure that African migrants are protected?
When it comes to at least the role of Morocco within the African Union, it has been pushing I'm talking about the official narrative. It has been pushing for African solidarity to address not only migration but also other issues faced by the continent when it comes to COVID and the ongoing economic crisis. And I would say, if we go back to Sanchez's statements earlier today, he talked about not only when it comes to migration, it's not only about stopping people from accessing a certain country illegally, or in other words, border control, but it's also about addressing the core issues that are pushing people to migrate. So that's another way of addressing it when it comes within the African Union. I think it's very important to address to consolidate or reinforce relations between the countries to address the issues. Specifically, they're not only about political instability, but also economic issues like the lack of job opportunities and the need for investments to create more jobs that would maybe help in decreasing the migratory flows to Europe and but also through transit countries such as Morocco.
All right, thank you so much, Souad Anouar, a journalist from Morocco World News, Rabat, Morocco. Of course, we do hope that thorough investigations are made, because over time we've been hearing of investigations when it comes to migrants who have been treated unfairly at the border. So we do hope that thorough investigations are done in this particular matter. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And right now we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we have situations in Cameroon where over 30 people were killed in land dispute clashes. We'll have details of that after this break.